You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
Okay, this is a lot of fun. Rosie, what's the name of the guy the Leafs haven't officially signed just yet?
Jani Hakanpaa.
How did you pronounce it when we got the news on Monday?
I don't know, but I thought you burped on yourself when you were saying it, because I don't really know that guy too well, and his name's pretty neat, but I got her down pat now.
We know him now. We're going to talk about him on today's edition of Leafs Morning Take. What's going on, everybody? It's July 3rd. Nick Alberga, Jay Rosehill. Been pretty quiet since Monday, Rosie?
It has been a little bit quiet on the home front. It's not over, but I was hoping for a bigger splash. I'm kind of looking at that forward group now, but on the bright side, I think we've updated our D, so happy about that. Got a couple of guys, not just one as well, so look on the bright side, baby.
Overall, feeling optimistic for sure. The Leafs did announce some depth signings on Tuesday. Dakota Mermis, who, by the way, played in the London Knights with Mitch Marner back in the day, Anthony Stolarz as well. Signs a one-way deal, I believe, so he'll have to go through waivers. He'll be like that Lagesson type. Phil Myers as well, and Cedric Paré. But the theme seems to be like big blue liners. I think they've signed like 5 defensemen unofficially because, again, Hakanpaa isn't official, but it's quite clear what they're looking to do on the back end.
Yeah, it seems that way. It's been a trend, going back a few years now. Big stud D-men that, play big, play physical, tough to play against, can move the puck up into the hands of the forwards that they have a lot of money invested in up front. So, clear your end, get it in their hands, and let them cook, I think, is the MO right now. And we'll see how Chief brings the whole strategy and the systems and everything to complement everybody.
The remaining names in terms of UFAs, anybody intrigue you? Vladimir Tarasenko, Jack Roslovic, Tyler Johnson, JVR, Justin Schultz, Daniel Sprong. Right away, the name that sticks out for me is obviously Vladdy Tarasenko. Just won the Cup with the Florida Panthers. Also won the Cup in 2019 with Craig Berube. I just don't know if there's going to be a fit there, but there's a clear need for a top 6 forward, namely on the wing for Toronto.
Yeah, I hear you. He does stand out, a guy that's won twice, been in the league a while, lots of talent. And biggest thing for me is he knows what Craig Berube's MO is, and he can help instill that into the locker room, whether it's just little things, man, that you can't really put on paper, just how you practice, what the expectations are. If you have some guys in the locker room that already know a new coach, they can kind of help expedite that process to get everyone on the same page and kind of understand what direction this guy wants to go. And the kicker is the direction that he wants to go is a way that's turned a team around entirely before and won a Stanley Cup. So that's the big thing for me, as well as obviously his skill and the addition that the forwards need. I don't know if they can make that happen or not. I think there's going to be some moving around, but there's no doubt that the powers that be are interested and trying to get something done, I'm sure.
Because that's the clear need, right? Tyler Bertuzzi's the big name that was lost in the top 6, goes to Chicago, and by all accounts, the Leafs were sniffing around on Jeff Skinner, goes to the Edmonton Oilers. So I think ultimately that's where we're looking. I heard on July 1, the Leafs were scouring the trade market looking for some more help up front. Easier said than done. And ultimately, you just never say never. Maybe there's a pathway where Nick Robertson gets another shot, right? I think they have some guys who could be given an opportunity, but ultimately you want to bring somebody from the outside. And that's my curiosity now, is how they're going to add some depth up front. But let's be honest and fair about it. I think this roster is a lot more balanced than it was, say, a week ago, where it's like you reallocated that Bertuzzi money to the back end. And in the long scheme of things, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it's, we talked about it before. You want to have this well-rounded roster. You want it to look the way a winning team looks. But when you look at their problems, it's been scoring in the playoffs and power play, these types of things. So, we talked about the Marner thing. If that happens, if not, you got these 4 guys making massive amounts of money. They need to do their bloody job. That's what it comes down to. We can get right to the spring. We can have the well-rounded roster. We can have a goalie that's hot. All that stuff's great. But those guys have to do their job better than they've done it in the past. Take your pick on how far you want to go back. But those high-end stud all-stars, first ballot, this, that, they have to be who they're supposed to be when it matters. And that's on them right now. And I mean, we have our reservations about how that can happen because it's not something we haven't tried. It's been done before and it hasn't worked out to the standards that this market expects. So, a big season for those players to say, I am worth this money and I can carry this team.
Definitely. And I think ultimately the unfortunate part about all this, we got to wait till next spring to figure out if this is going to be a different look for this outfit in the Stanley Cup playoffs under Craig Berube. That's just a reality. They're going to play in the regular season. Matthews is going to score 50-plus goals. Mitch Marner is going to sniff with 100 points. John Tavares is going to be in his consistent self. Nylander is going to do his thing. I just ultimately it's going to get to that point, a 7-game series in round 1. We're going to figure out what this team truly is. And I think all this is on Brendan Shanahan. If they are, as you referenced, bringing back the core 4, which at this point it seems to be headed that direction, everything's going to fall on Brendan Shanahan because I think a lot of people know the ending to this story. It's a shit one, but I think they might learn that this was a definition of insanity and it was the wrong decision to make. But again, only time will tell. There's a lot of people out there that suggest that maybe, hey, Craig Berube can tap through to Mitch Marner in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and the proof will be in the pudding come playoff time, Rosie. Time to announce the Born and Raised winners, by the way. Congratulations to Mike Bruno and Marcus Krebs. You've both won a pair of tickets to the Born and Raised concert series in St. Catharines happening this weekend. Your headliners, City and Color, Alexis on Fire, Metric, and The U. So enjoy those, and I'll send those tickets later on today or tomorrow. So that should be fun.
I know those guys are going to have a good time. The Used brings me back to my high school days with the old CD Rolodex, throwing those guys in to get a little bit fired up. So that'll be cool, man. I'm a little bit jealous those guys are going to that because if I was around, I would be partaking.
What was that called? Like Shiny Tunes?
Big
Remember
Shiny
those? Like,
Tunes,
yeah.
Much music stuff. Oh yeah.
Oh, man. That
Big
was an
Shiny
era
Tunes
to be
2 was a
alive,
good
eh?
one. Yeah, there was some good stuff, man. I remember thinking as we're ripping through the CD Rolodexes, I was like, one day this CD deck here will have like, you'll be able to just like store a ton of songs and it'll just be
Yeah.
wild. You can pick whatever you want and you'll listen to it all day. The radio will be dead. And we have that right now. Any song known to man, you can just click it on your phone. And lo and behold, though, we still use the radio. So I don't know. It's, I guess the novelty worn off, but it was wild times with the CD changer back in the
I
day.
remember I had a side business in high school where I was burning CDs for a buddy. I had to like download the songs. He'd give me a list of like 300 songs. I'd download the songs and burn the CD for him, make a couple bucks.
It's crazy. I remember going to bed, putting 2 songs, downloading them on LimeWire or Napster or something, and then waking up in the morning and running to see if they're downloaded. And like if we got a phone call or something and someone picked up the phone or whatever, it would kill it. It was too funny, man. What we
Yeah.
went through in our youth, people just don't know.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things we downloaded on LimeWire back in the day. We'll leave it at that. Brian Burke's coming on. Brian Burke in about 10 minutes or so. I just wonder how he feels about what they've done the last couple days.
I know it's fun to pick his brain. A guy that had the reins and was at the helm of this big machine that we call the Maple Leafs, and getting his perspective on what he thinks about certain areas, the question marks we have surrounding free agency, and what's left to do. It's always good to pick Berkey's mind.
At the Leafs Nation 401 here on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Leafs Morning Take wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com for the very latest on all things Toronto Maple Leafs. The opening segment is brought to you by Greta Bar YYZ. For a good time, find Greta, 590 King Street West. Weekly specials, live sports, over 60-plus arcade games. Let the games begin. Go big. Go to Greta Bar YYZ. So we're going to jump into the Jani Hakanpää situation. So we'll start from the beginning. It was reported on July 1st that the 6'7" defenseman was inking a 2-year, $3 million deal with the Leafs, but nothing has been made official. He's a big boy, hits everything that moves. But according to Steve Simmons of the Toronto Sun, Hakanpää has a bad knee, and according to a couple of Steve's sources, he may never play again. So we don't even know if this is going to happen. It's not official to begin with.
I know that's a pretty bold statement this day and age to say that a knee injury I know he's 32 years old or so, but it's not very often in this day and age that a knee injury ends your career. You can no longer play. They go in there nowadays and they do stuff that used to, potentially end your career, in 15 minutes with the scopes and all these things. And I'm hearing like, I don't know, bone on bone I keep reading, and I don't know, you can put things in there that would, act as the cartilage or the ligaments or whatever's going wrong in there. Seems like it could be fixed. And if he knew this was a problem, you'd think he would have been on it already. And I don't really understand how you can sign a guy, which isn't official yet, but then all of a sudden this career ending, like as a player, as the Dallas Stars, as the Toronto Maple Leafs, everyone's kind of got to be a little bit more transparent, you would think, on, oh, here's a situation that obviously is detrimental to the deal getting done and to the player moving teams. It's just odd to me that this wasn't in the limelight before the announcement made. But as we know, it's not official yet. They haven't signed on paper. And I have a feeling this guy is getting jammed into every specialist he can find wherever in North America to figure out exactly what it is. That's how the Leafs roll. They don't care about money or anything like that. Get this guy to the best, get him on an airplane, get him in there, and try to get to the bottom of it. But if there is some question marks, I could see them restructuring that contract and that deal with like a games played bonus type of thing to say, we like you, but if you can't play, we can't pay you and have you on the cap. So you could restructure it in a bonus hit type of situation, maybe.
A few of the quotes from Simmons in his various articles. There was one on Monday, then he took to Twitter last night as well. Firstly, on Monday, he said the Leafs signed him to play, but many doubt he will. It's said to be bone on bone with not much knee left. It's said to be trouble. Then, as mentioned yesterday, he tweeted the following: I was told his knee was bone on bone. I asked the Leafs about this. They said their doctors cleared him to play. We'll find out in the fall or later whether he can play. But it's interesting because, again, this hasn't been made official. The last couple of days, I think yesterday, they made the Stolarz signing official. They made the Matt Murray extension official, but still nothing on Hakanpaa. So I'm sure they're doing their due diligence behind the scenes. But the last thing you want is damaged goods. I think you make a good point that I think you better figure this out contractually. It's one thing to want the player. It's one thing to suggest that he can better your roster. But the last thing you want, considering what just transpired a year ago with John Klingberg, is damaged goods.
Yeah, I know it is reminiscent of Klinger coming in and just not being able to play any meaningful percentage of the season, which is obviously not the name of the game here. So it is interesting. I don't know if the Leafs were in the dark or if a fast one got pulled on them or if they just didn't do their due diligence or if the player was being a little bit, I don't want to say shady, but not being fully transparent with what's going on.
Yeah.
It's just odd at that level with all those moving parts that didn't come into the limelight before they announced that they're going to sign this guy. And I mean, thankfully it's not on paper, it's not official, and it's not a done deal. And like I said, I imagine they are jumping through hoops right now trying to get to the bottom of exactly where this guy's knee is at right now.
Well, I'll tell you, if Hakanpaa can play, I think he's a big upgrade. Whether it's 5, 6, or 7, I think he brings depth. Again, I think the theme with Brad Treliving in the ads here in terms of defensemen outside of Mermis, who's like 6 foot, is like trees, for a lack of a better term. I think you look at Hakanpaa, the guy hits everything in sight. That's just the read on him. I've watched a lot of Dallas Stars hockey, watched him back in the day as well with some other squads. And, that's the read on him. Obviously, he's got his deficiencies like any other player. But again, this team has been lacking that guy. And again, he shoots right, which has been coveted in this market for a while.
I know. I'm hoping Steve Simmons is dead wrong. I'm hoping that it's not as bad as it seems. I'm hoping that I don't know, he can get something done like right now as far as physically on his knee, some kind of a procedure, have him getting in the rehab, get in the gym, blah, blah, blah. And he's ready to rock. And maybe you miss a month of the season or miss October or something, maybe, and then you're ready to rock. I know that's rolling the dice and that's not ideal. But when you think of the Leafs and having some big boys back there and you think about watching a game and having, the puck in the hands of the Nylanders, the Marners, the Matthews, hopefully they can cook and do their thing, which I'm sure they will. And then having a team come into play Toronto and just being like, are you kidding me? Like Benoit and McCabe and Hakanpaa. And then you got, Morgan Riley's in there. Like now all of a sudden, instead of Morgan Riley being like at the tip of the spear, like you have to do everything, all of a sudden he's like blended in there now. And it just seems so much more robust. It seems deeper. And I can imagine teams coming in to play the Leafs going, Jesus, like we don't want the puck all that bad anymore because they're just getting smashed in our end, and those boys can move it up, and away you go with the talent up front. So it's exciting to think of. We'll see how it works, but that paired with the mentality that Craig Berube is going to bring to this team, which is more accountability. I imagine there's going to be a little more snot. They're going to go north. It's going to be simpler. It's going to be less dicking around, and let these guys all get on the same page. Hopefully chemistry, starts to boil, and we can have a pretty scary looking team. And, that hasn't happened yet, but there's reason to believe that certainly could, which is kind of exciting.
The schedule was released on Tuesday, Rosie, and obviously some dates to circle. The season opener, October 9th in Montreal. They actually have a back-to-back on the road, Montreal and then New Jersey on the Thursday. So the first visit against Sheldon Keefe. The home opener, October 12th against Kyle Dubas's Pittsburgh Penguins. Some of the notable returns that we're looking forward to, Sheldon Keefe, January 16th, will make his return to Scotiabank Arena. Then you have Brody and Bertuzzi, December 2nd. The other ones are not as big. I guess Samsonov, November 20th. But it's always fun to look at the schedule and sort of circle some dates.
Yeah, I know. It's fun when there's nothing earth-shattering. But it's fun to see, them. Like Samsonov sticks out to me. Will Samsonov play against the Leafs, and
Probably.
how will he do? Which Samsonov will show up?
Shut
It'll
out.
be interesting to see. Yeah, and when those guys come into town, it's a bit of a storyline. Not a huge deal. Lots of guys have played different places and they go back and play. Lots of guys know different players on different teams. It is what it is. But yeah, it's fun to circle that stuff. It's kind of odd that we don't have the home opener until like October 12th or something. It seems kind of late, but we'll be waiting a little while for that. And yeah, it's exciting to think about the season getting rocking again.
Yeah, that's normally how it goes. They usually start on the road, then they play the back-to-back. Sometimes they start on home, but it's either like the Wednesday or the Saturday they'll have their home opener. So that one taking place October 12th against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Their first visit to Boston, October 26th. The first visit to Utah, March 10th. They got 16 back-to-backs, but it's always fun to look at that schedule, and certainly in the first month. You can lose a season in the first month. I'm so intrigued to see how they start the year under Craig Berube.
Yeah, I know. I think there'll be a little bit of a feeling out period on getting things, all adjusted and figuring out what the identity is. Again, like I said, I think it helps if you have players that were on specifically that St. Louis team that won, to kind of help with the locker room and get the guys to understand, what direction they're going, what he's meaning by certain things, and just kind of expedite the process to getting this team having the identity that Craig Berube is planning for them.
Certainly, and looking forward to Craig Berube in that era, and also some of the change that the Maple Leafs have made here in the offseason as you bring in the one and only frequent guest to this program. It is Brian Burke. What's going on, Berkey?
Morning, guys. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for doing this. There's a variety of different routes we can start this conversation, but I thought firstly, it would be great to get your perspective and your view on the whole Jani Hakanpää situation, and more so like what happens behind the scenes when you sign a player.
Well, I'm not sure precisely what you mean, Nick. I apologize. What?
There's some gray area with Hakanpää. They brought him in. It's not official, but then Steve Simmons of the Toronto Sun speculating there could be like a knee injury there. So the Maple Leafs haven't made this thing official. More so like just wondering what happens behind the scenes, like when you sign a player, what you have to go through to clear him.
Well, he would have been asked to clear a physical, as you guys know. And there's at the start of the season, at the end of the season, the player has to be certified by the medical staff. It's Form 25A, I believe. And they have to fill out that form at the end of the exit physical. At the end of the year, they've got to detail any problems, any potential surgeries, any injuries, anything that has to be treated. And if the player comes in and has an existing injury, he's got to clear his physical, or won't be allowed to play.
Yeah. Hey, Berkey, when you're at the helm of NHL teams and you're signing guys or even drafting guys, how much due diligence, like how deep do you go into a player that you may not be that familiar with as far as character, obviously injuries and stuff like that too, but do you got to go pretty deep and really start to dig on a guy sometimes?
Well, the character part's very different, Rosie, and the answer is yes. The character part, we better have that down, at least the first 4 rounds anyway. I used to tell our staff, we can't know every player in the 7th round or whatever, but we got to know the first 4 rounds, and we got to know everything about them. We got to know what hand they eat with, what kind of food they like, that kind of thing. So when they go through the scout, say it's Jay Rosehill from Alberta, and you're presenting. The Western scout would say, okay, here's Jay Rosehill, height, weight, brothers, sisters, siblings, what they do, what dad does for work. You know, he was an auctioneer. What mom does for work. Does she work? We want to know that. If they have two-income family, they both work. What the other siblings, are they successful? For PK Subban, we interviewed him. He had two sisters who were high school teachers, and one was a principal already. His dad was a principal. The family excelled, and it was obvious early on the kid was going to excel also. So you do a lot of homework on that. On the injuries, unless the guy's got an injury history, you ask him about it. Our medical staff asks him about it. There's a cursory examination, but unless we were tipped off that there was a problem, we're probably not going to catch it the first time. Doesn't matter if he's got a problem, he's still got a problem. Like, in other words, it doesn't solve it. The fact that we don't pick it up on the screening doesn't help him if he can't play.
And I guess we'll find out in the coming days what happens here with Jani Hakanpää. But generally speaking, and it really doesn't matter what people think in this market, but people are pleased, are optimistic, they're feeling positive about the first day of free agency. What did you make of the moves Tree made?
Well, I don't think he won free agency. I think people think Nashville did, but I think he certainly improved his team and did a good job in areas where they really need help. They need to shore up their D, and they did that. I'm a big TJ Brody fan, as you all know. I had him in Calgary. I think he's underrated and he'll be missed, but I'm really a huge fan of all the defensemen that they brought in, really, but especially Tannen. I mean, I think he's an elite shutdown defender, and they'll get 4 years out of him. They may not get the whole contract at a high level, but they'll get 4 years out of him at a top level. His leadership, proven winner. Had his brother in Pittsburgh, obviously, Brandon rather. So, no, I like the moves. I think Tree's a sharp guy. I think he's a smart guy. I think he's learned from all the mistakes he's made, which aren't many. But I think he's getting better at the job, not worse. And that's very common with people in their second job. They often excel more than when they're first time through. And it looks like that to me with him.
Looking that way. Burke, going into the crease, we've got two goaltenders it looks like they're going with. Not a ton of games played between the two, but what was your take when you're deciding on your crease? Do you like to have that one solidified stud who has proven, or do you mind having, switch hitting two pretty good goalies where either one of them could take the reins and take off?
Well, I think we've seen an evolution in the goaltending position just in the short time that I've been around, the last 30 years. You've seen a complete, Marty Brodeur playing 80 games. Yeah. And now I think teams are looking to platoon way more. They want a 50-30 split. And I know whenever I say that, people say, Brian Burke can't even add, that's not 82. Shut up. 50-30 split roughly. That's what teams are shooting for. But I think Vegas kind of stumped everyone again a couple of years ago by going with, we got three big guys who all have good athletic ability. We're going to sort it out and figure out who will be the starter. And they won a cup. So I think a lot of people now are saying, as long as we draft people who are 6'3" to 6'4", 6'5", with good athletic ability, we'll take our chances on one of them turning into a goaltender.
And the Leafs got this monster, Anthony Stolarz. I don't know how much you know about him, but I think to add to your point, the crease has become so volatile that it almost isn't the best direction or pathway to sign these guys long-term and have a bona fide stud, because you just don't know what you're going to get on a yearly basis.
Yeah, and we're seeing that time and again, and the proven formula of having a starter play 50 games and then he's your number one guy. That's not going to be the model anymore. You're going to start off with, a lot of teams are going to start off with a 1A and 1B and let them fight it out for the crease, see who gets in that. The guy that's hot might play 10 out of 12 games, and then the other guy might take over. So I think it's really evolving as we speak, as we watch. The goaltending position is evolving again. So Stolarz is a huge kid. He's 6'6". I think his skate sign is 6'8". Really athletic for a kid that big. Usually, some of the athleticism suffers with a guy that big. Usually, he loses his quickness. He doesn't have quick feet. Doesn't react well because he's too big. But that's not the case with this kid. I think he's going to make it real interesting. And Matt Murray, everyone ignores Matt Murray. Matt Murray's a great kid and a good goaltender. If he's healthy, he'll be a factor too. He'll get some games.
Yeah, interesting. What as far as GM, what's going on right now behind the scenes? We've had the Mitch Marner talk. You've been vocal, Burke, about not having that much money invested in, a small handful of guys. What do you think Tree Living's doing right now, and how difficult is it to try to make a move of that magnitude, especially when you act in the no trade clause that Mitch has?
Well, the other thing too, Rosie, is if you go back, I've been vocal about that, but I was vocal about that in real time. Like I said at the time, this model wasn't going to work. Back when they signed Nylander, made the big four. Yeah. Right on the spot that day, I said this is a mistake, and I've been vocal about it since. I stand by that. I think it's a cap model, even going up $5 million in the cap, it's still not workable for me. No other team has four similar forwards locked up in pure skill positions, and so I think they still have to solve the problem. Obviously, with no trades and no moves, which are really, you can really question the wisdom of all that. But now looking back, but I think it's really a case where you're gonna have to negotiate. One of these guys is gonna have to convince one of these guys to get out, and I think the logical guy to move would be Willie Nylander. Not Mitch Marner. I've said that before, but it might end up being Mitch Marner. But I think they're going to have to talk one of them into leaving. And it's not popular. People aren't going to like it, but they're going to get it.
Why do you think it should be Nylander?
I think that Mitch Marner is a really important player on a team. He kills penalties. I know people are down on him right now, but he's a great kid and an important player. They're both good players. I think Mitch Marner is a much more valuable player to me.
Yeah, there's no doubt that they're good players. It's just a matter of, like you say, when you put them all together, is it sustainable, and will it give you enough leverage on the other sides of your roster to make things work to go the distance? But right now, with a lot of people paying attention to free agency and picking and looking at every little word that Tree Living says, how did you find the market being the GM there? You're a pretty straightforward, straight shooter guy. You always just call it like you see it. But did you ever find that you're trying to play an angle with the media or release a little bit of info or play that game in that big market?
Not really. I felt, I've said this before, and you guys have heard me say it. I felt I was treated fairly by the media in Toronto. We didn't play well, they wrote that. When we played well, they wrote that. By and large, notable exceptions. But the fact of the matter is, it's the size of the market that's a killer for the GM. I was explaining this to Tree when he took the job. You go to Calgary after a game, on a hockey night game, so a Saturday night game in Calgary. There's 40 or 50 people in the dressing room after the game. 40 or 50 people with cameras and microphones and tape recorders. There's 100 after a Leafs game on Saturday. That's why the dressing rooms are so big. They're not for the players. The dressing rooms are that big to accommodate the media in the NHL. I'm not making this up. Rosie, you're laughing at me, but it's true. It's true. That's the only reason they have rooms that big, or we'd all have much smaller rooms. We'd much rather have our players closer in contact. My favorite rink in the NHL, or well, not the NHL, my favorite rink in the world is in not Mannheim, in Cologne in Germany, because they have the dressing room at practice has a sliding wall. So the players, when they get dressed, are about 6 or 8 feet apart, can make eye contact and talk without shouting. Then practice ends and they slide the wall back in Cologne, and now there's room for the media. That's what I'd like to see in all the rinks, but it's not going to happen. But that's why the rooms are that big, and that's why the pressure in Toronto is unrelenting. There's 80 people, 90 people, 100 people writing about your team, and they're all picking up a rock when you lose. For me, it was me or Phil Kessel or Dion or Ron Wilson, but someone picks up a rock and there's 100 rocks, all of a sudden 20 coming for me, 20 for the coach, 20 for Phil Kessel, and next thing you know, there's a whole bunch of rocks flying around and people are starting to panic. You just have to ignore it. But I think overall, I've said this before, I believe the treatment I received in Toronto was fair. I didn't get the job done there. People wrote that, and that's okay.
Yeah, it is a wild market. I remember getting off pregame skate and I couldn't get to my stall because there's too many cameras, too many reporters, too many wires, and you're tiptoeing over their wires and everything. And I'm just shaking my head saying it's a Tuesday against Columbus, and this place is just crawling with someone wanting a story, someone to get their name out there and print something that a lot of people see. It is wild and crazy. And now that we're in it on the other side, we're seeing it from the other side, and it's just as crazy as it was back then.
Yeah, it's not getting better.
No.
And the social media side has made it a real cruel business. Like, I didn't have any of that stuff to deal with when I first got started. And I know I sound like an old man, but when I first got started, there was no social media. There was no internet. And so we didn't have to deal with this lunatic fringe that they have in some of the markets.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, like the whole thing about the Marner situation has been the PR battle, Berkey. I'm sure you've noticed in the last month and a half alone, every scenario has played out in the media. Do you think that's calculated from both parties? I actually think Tree's done a pretty good job of watering the fire, if you will, because again, not much has come out, in the last couple of weeks, but I think he's done a pretty good job of just chilling out here.
Yeah, I think he's done a good job. He's an unflappable guy. He's not a guy that gets excited or worked up. He's not like me at all. He's much calmer than I am. And therefore, I think he's handling this really well. And it's a tough situation. It's something he inherited. And it's a tough situation. It's not, when I say we got to move one of those guys, it's easier said than done. And I like the players involved. I like all four of those players. Mitch isn't going anywhere. Austin's not going anywhere. I don't think Tavares is going anywhere. And Tavares has been a good soldier. He's played well. He's earned his money. And the other two guys are good guys that have played well here. It's not easy to say, oh, it should be Nylander. I like Nylander. His dad played for me. But I think if you have to do addition by subtraction, the logical guy to move is Nylander if you can. And I'd hate to move Mitch, but they might have to. I don't think the model works. I don't think that's news to anyone. It's getting better with the cap going up $5 million, but it's still a problem.
Yeah, you mentioned John Tavares there. There's a buzz around, the media right now about them taking the captaincy away from John Tavares, giving it to, most likely you'd give it to Austin Matthews. What's your thought on that? Would that be something you'd ever do, or do you think that's crazy to think that they would do that in that market, and what a buzz that would make?
Well, I've seen teams do it. I've never done it that I can recall. I'm pretty sure I'd remember if I did. I remember I've had the discussion before, and I feel it's such a drastic step. Then it's admitting you made a mistake in my mind if you put the C on a guy and then take it away. But you've seen it happen. It happened in San Jose, and it's happened recently. So it's not unusual. It's not unheard of, but it is unusual. I wouldn't entertain that discussion. I think John Tavares is a quality player and a good guy. I think he's earned his money. He's done a good job. He's killed penalties. He's worked on a power play. I think he's a useful guy. He's good in the community. I wouldn't entertain that discussion. I've heard the rumors, though, the rumblings.
Yeah.
Well, they're out there. Berkey, I just want to thank you for dropping by the show throughout the season. Any big plans for the summer?
Heading to Stampede for a couple of days. I play in the celebrity poker tournament, the Cowboys every year. Then I have my shooting event. I do a trap shooting event in Calgary. I think, Rosie, I invited you once to the trap shooting event.
You might. I know I couldn't make it, but that's something that I would be down for sure.
Yeah, I'll give you a call after we get off the air. But I host a trap shooting event called Burke's Targets for Kids. And then we're going to go to Langara, go fishing. So it'll be a few weeks away. It'll be good.
Love it.
Awesome, Burkey. Awesome. Have a great summer. We'll talk in the fall, okay?
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it, Burkey.
Brian Burke, one of our favorites here on Leafs Morning Take, just telling it how it is. And I love it, the perspective, too. Everybody's like, trade Marner. Burkey's like, I think Nylander needs to go. And I think he supports it. I don't know if I'd go that direction, but it's still a conversation to be had, right?
Yeah, it just makes sense that you need to break that up, but it's just difficult to do, man. It really is, with the no trades or the kickers. And, like he kind of alluded to, those are a problem of the past that were a mistake in hindsight. And I don't think that you needed them to get the jobs done. I think they were just given out of good faith. And, hey, I like you. Here's everything you could ever want. And it's biting them in the ass right now, no question. But it's funny hearing Berkey talk about that. With the Tavares thing, I just think it's ridiculous. Like, I just look at the fans and the media who've never been in a locker room, and they're just like, well, the best player should have the captaincy. And it's not about who's got the best skill. Like, the best goal scorer it's not a C that says best goal scorer. Like, it's not what it's for. And John Tavares is in that locker room, and he is a consummate professional. He does everything the right way. He doesn't cut corners. He leads by example. He's been around the block for a long time. And he has that C for a reason. And there's lots of times the Leafs go without a captain until they find, a suitable player to wear that. And John was that guy. He's got 1 year left. To strip him of the C would be such a bloody distraction, be embarrassing for him. It would be embarrassing for Austin Matthews. It's ridiculous to even have the conversation. He's got 1 year left. Wear the goddamn C. It doesn't matter if you're the top player in the world or the highest scorer or any of that. It's what he does in the locker room to keep those guys thinking the right ways as a professional. And to think that just giving it to Austin Matthews because he's the best goal scorer is ridiculous. It would bring in so much outside distraction and so much unnecessary friction that is just so dumb. And when I hear people say it, I'm just like, why? Because Austin scores the most goals? Like, use your head. I don't agree with it whatsoever.
Agreed. I think if you're going to use that bullet, it would have been last summer. I think you just ride out the Tavares contract. And even if you bring him back, I think maybe it's a next summer play. You made your play. You made your change. You're not going to make a big four trade. Craig Berube's coming in. You're so right. Like, I think it would just add chaos, panic. I mean, just noise, unneeded noise at that.
Totally.
And I think it's not like John Tavares has fallen off the face of the earth and he's not producing anymore. The guy's still a point per game guy, just under that. I think leadership qualities that more than most people on this show, obviously having been in an NHL room, it's more than just your captain, being your best player. It's about leadership qualities. I remember covering JT when he was 14 years old. Like, the guy's he was born to be a captain in this league, whether it was at the Islanders, the Oshawa Generals, like leadership personified right there. And I just think it would ruffle way too many feathers, especially when you plan to keep the guy in the fold. So I'm a stiff no as well.
Yeah. And like, tell me, say they do it. They strip him of the C and paste it on Austin Matthews. What do you get out of it? Like, give me the positives. Give me the upside. What does it do? What happens that's so goddamn special that you have to, embarrass your captain and a veteran of the league who, like you say, has done nothing but play his heart out, do his best, show up every day, consummate professional. You embarrass him. You put it on Matthews for no reason other than, well, he's our best player, so he should have the C. And what do you get out of it? You bring in a whole windstorm and media fall of everyone talking about, how many questions he's going to have to ask for 2 weeks straight about getting stripped of the C and how much negative attention that would be for absolutely no reason. It brings in a whole bunch of negativity and you get no positivity out of it. If he has a 5-year deal left, fine, let's have that conversation. He's got 1 season left. Let him wear the C, let him ride it out. Austin knows who he is. It doesn't change anything of he's the best player on the team. He can take all the leadership that he wants. He can stand up in the room. He can say whatever he wants. He can get on the bench and be vocal. He can do whatever he wants. It doesn't matter if that piece of material is on his chest or not. Nothing good comes from stripping John Tavares of the C.
Agreed. When I saw that, it made no sense. The timeliness of it, like, it's July, early July, like, there's no need to go to that scenario. Again, I thought if you're making a change like that and you were coming back with Keefe, it was going to happen last summer, where I think you have different bullets. You want to try something new and fresh, and it just wouldn't make sense to combo the Craig Berube move, especially, every time somebody new comes in any walk of life, whether it be a job or anything like that, I think there's an evaluation process and period. And that's where I wonder, Craig Berube coming in, how he feels about the leadership core, right? You have to throw that into account as well.
Yeah, and he doesn't know that yet. He has to see that team in action first, right? And Austin Matthews will be the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. It just, you don't have to scorch half the dressing room and the whole beginning of the season and all the attention towards something negative to start off the year just to get that to happen quicker. John's the captain. He should be the captain. He's going to be the captain for the rest of the year. And then you can make that adjustment. And that's what should happen. So people that try to shove that beforehand, I don't think they really understand locker rooms or the consequences of doing something like that in Toronto.
First time ever you've had an opinion on this podcast, so appreciate that.
Sorry.
No, you stepped up. You were horny to talk about that yesterday, so we got it in today. I'm right there with you on that boat. Since we last spoke on Monday too, TJ Brody signed with Chicago, 2 years, 3.75. Man, that's a really weird rebuild. I guess the word rebuild is a lot different in this league. Even San Jose, like Tyler Toffoli goes there to play with Macklin Celebrini. I still have no clue what Mike Greer is doing, the GM of the San Jose Sharks. Just sort of feels incompetent for that job. And maybe I'm wrong. In the next 5 to 7 years, they turn things around. But in Chicago, they're just putting vets, absolute vets, around Connor Bedard. Like, they brought in the big rig Patrick Maroon, they brought in Bertuzzi, they brought in Brody, Laurent Brossois. Unfortunate for them, like, they're trending towards being maybe like a team that's bottom 9 and not bottom 3. Unfortunately, I just don't know what you're doing, but I guess it is a league where anything is possible. Maybe Connor Bedard has like a Hart Trophy-esque season.
Yeah, we'll see. It's interesting, the moves that they made. It makes a splash. It's makes you perk up your eyebrows and say, wow, that's interesting. How's that going to go? I don't think they're going to make a run for, the playoffs necessarily, but I think they could be better than you think. And it all depends on how those guys cook together. But it is kind of interesting. They made a lot of additions, and that team's going to look a lot different. So I'm excited for, the beginning of the season to start and see a lot of those guys in that unbelievably cool Blackhawk jersey. I think it's one of the best in the league. And it'll be cool to see those guys all surround that kid and see how Bedard can, make his hopefully a full season without being injured, but those guys around him, see if they can make something happen. And, I don't think it's going to be any earth shattering performances, but it's something to watch anyways. I'm intrigued.
Rosie, what's wild is, like, year after year, we see these extensions come through. And again, not to pick on the guy and other guys, but then you see some of the extensions the Leafs have signed. You're like, whew, how did that happen? Like, even years back, like the Mitch Marner number at 10.9, like, guys repeatedly are signing for less than that are probably around the same ilk as a Mitch Marner. Like, it's just really, really fascinating to see, some of the issues with the organization the last couple of years in negotiating. Like, we talked about Brad Treliving having an end game, with guys like Tyler Bertuzzi and Nikita Zadorov, and not going past that. Just negotiating with players is just a lot different than it was maybe a couple years ago. But some of the contracts the Leafs have handed out in recent memory, like even, 4 years at 3.5 for Alex Kerfoot, like every penny you save goes a long way in this cap world, I feel.
Yeah, it does. And I think this year, you could argue that it's not the case with that. You already have some big contracts, and you've got the Tavares on the last year at 11 mil. Like, it eats up a lot. But I think the guys that we signed, you look around, you go, holy, that did quite well. And, every time I turn around, a guy's getting paid $1 million, $1.5 million more than I think he probably would have got. And it's like, geez, teams are doing it left, right, and center. It's not just something the Leafs have done in the past, but this year with the guys they signed, every one of the terms, every one of the AAVs is like reasonable, understandable, like acceptable. And it's kind of a nice feeling rather than, oh my God, like, who are we going to have to play with? We got to pay this guy this much. And how did we not get him for it? There's none of that. It's like, it's all reasonable. It's all rational, and it makes sense. It's logical. And I feel good about the situation they're in. They still have some cap room to work with, and they're in a pretty good place as far as that. They're not butted up against it by the last $25 or whatever the hell that happened a year or two ago, where they're just running so thin, so lean. You can't make a move. You're totally squished against it. They're not there, and they've made some potentially meaningful additions. So I'm pretty happy with the terms and everything of these contracts, because it's not the way it has been in the past, where it's like you just open your eyes and think, oh my God, how did that guy get that contract?
Yeah, some folks in the chat, understandably so, bringing up the whole tax situation, like 8.5 million in Florida is like 11.5 in Ontario. I'm just saying, like, generally speaking, it never feels like the Leafs win contract negotiations. It's always heavily in favor of the player. I would throw Nylander into that conversation. They had no choice, in my opinion, at least, to pay Nylander. I disagree with Ryan Burke. I think Marner should be the one to go. I think Nylander's a guy that I noticed in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And for me, ultimately, that's all that matters. I don't care what you do in the regular season. How does your game cater to the postseason? And I think Nylander, his brand, his style caters better than, say, Mitch Marner. But maybe Craig Berube lights a fire under Mitch Marner, and he's a different player come postseason time. But I think all in all, you just look around the league. Like, I see Anton Lundell just signed like a 6-year extension at $5 million per season. Like, that's an absolute steal. Even like the Slavkovsky contract with Montreal, $7.6 million over 8 seasons after next year. Like, that's going to be a steal. There never really has been a Leafs contract where I'm like, outside of, I guess, the Nylander one. I think, was it Lou who signed that one at 6.9? Like, he was steadfast that we're not going above that number. That was, it was a bargain at the end of that contract. But they're very seldom do you look at deals the Leafs have signed and you're like, man, that was pretty damn good.
Yeah, it's tough, right? This Slavkovsky, for example, he's only played X amount of NHL games, and people are like, "You give him a $60 million contract." Like, it's like, dude, you got to project where he's going, get him locked up now. And right now, it's like, wow, that's a lot for a young player. Give it 5 years when the guy could be potentially making 10 million, and he's only making what's his AAV, 7 point something. You're kicking ass for like 4 years, and that's when you can really cook. Oh, we got a
Yeah.
stud here who's not making stud money. We can surround him with the right pieces, and that's when teams go for runs and get to the promised land with contracts like that. So you gotta put some faith into some guys. You gotta roll the dice sometimes. Nobody has a crystal ball, but it is interesting. And yeah, you can absolutely go back and look at contracts for the Leafs that just are head shakers and head scratchers. But like people are talking about in the chat,
Yeah.
it's expensive to live in Toronto. You get taxed right to hell, and it's not easy to get guys to come to this market where they know they're going to be scrutinized, and then they know there's going to be 120 people in the locker room after pregame skate. It's tough, and I think the more we look at this and the more this becomes apparent with the Stanley Cup winners and what teams are successful, they all seem to come from states with no state tax, and that's becoming more and more apparent. So I think it probably will be something that the NHL has to look at within the CBA, but it's going to be tough to get the owners and the players all on the same page. And it could be something that is, a stickler to push through the next CBA. And I don't want to say that magic word that has happened in 2012 or whatever it was, but it could be a turning point in the negotiations and the stalemates and whatnot, because it's starting to become apparent that it's not really fair.
True enough. I should give Kyle Dubas his flowers. It was Kyle Dubas who signed that initial Nylander contract. So bravo to him. I think he is making a mockery of the Pittsburgh Penguins, by the way. I don't like what they're doing. You move out Riley Smith to get Kevin Hayes. Like 4 different teams are paying that guy. But anyways, we're here to talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs. Hank writes in, Nick Simps for Nylander is so hard. I guess I do.
You're such a simp, man. You're simping for him so hard.
Well, I don't know.
The way
My eye
plays
test tells me one guy shows up in the playoffs, the other doesn't. That's just what it does.
I kind of agree. And I mean, you can look at the points and stuff like that, fine, but it's kind of a mentality of a drive. Like, is one guy kind of on his heels tiptoeing, and is one guy leaning forward, barreling down, and one does it and one doesn't, it seems like. And yes, that can change, but it just doesn't seem like I've seen enough in the playoffs of a certain player who just doesn't seem to have the will to win that you expect in this market when you care about this team and all the passion that's behind it, and the guy at the helm who can help get it done doesn't seem to have that passion. That's a piss off for a lot of people, and that's why the shade's been thrown his way so far this year.
I won't lie, I'm genuinely disappointed. I think for all the conversation, it's like they almost want us to forget what was said after they lost to Game 7 in Boston, where they're preaching change, and they're coming back with the same players. And who knows what's going on behind the scenes, but it's alarming to me. And it's unfortunate because, again, who knows what Craig Berube can do? I feel great about Craig Berube. I feel positive. I feel confident. But again, we've seen a big enough sample size where I could probably tell you, I can give you a spoiler of what's going to happen in the playoffs when it comes to Mitch Marner. And they're not going to make the move, and they're going to hold his hand to free agency. So
what's going to happen? He's going to light it up, man. He is going to light it up. He's going to light it up this year.
Yeah, but I don't care. He's going to get 115 points in the regular season. He'll get 4 points in 7 games in the playoffs. All 4 points will come in one game, and we'll be like, bravo, Mitch, go sign your contract, and that's it. Like, I don't care.
Quite possibly. What if he's lighting it up to the point where there's a lot of pressure to re-sign him, and that starts to come down the barrel? Because you're not, when you're sitting there in, January, you don't really remember the playoffs last year that much, and you don't get the benefit of having the playoffs be soon where you can see where it goes. It's going to be interesting, man. And mark my words, Tree Living has tried to trade him. They're not running it back on purpose necessarily. He couldn't get it done. You read between the lines, it wasn't that hard to do that wasn't 100% committed to Mitch Marner, and that anything was on the table, and they just wanted to make their team better, which means if someone could come along with a trade that made any amount of sense and they could get Mitch to sign it, they would make that move. They 100% would. And I guarantee you he tried all throughout the last take your pick on the amount of weeks that he's been trying to get that
Hey,
done.
we talked about this in December. Remember, I said Mitch controls this whole thing. You're like, no, they'll do it. They'll force him into it. It's exactly what's happening. It sounds like he just doesn't want to go.
Or the right deal hasn't taken place. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes people want things to happen and it doesn't come around. No GMs, everyone's like, I'm busy with other shit. I can't do your Mitch Marner
Yeah.
thing right now. And
Yep.
maybe that's the case. We'll see. But I guarantee you there has been strides made to try to get a deal done from Tree Living, and it wasn't able to happen on the other end. And there's three parts of it. There's the Leafs, there's the other team, and there's Mitch Marner. It's not just two sides talking. There's a three-legged monster here, which makes it even more difficult.
Again, you're always careful with the PR in this market, but it's a lot different than the message they were trying to convey last summer about Nylander, where it's like, we want to sign this guy. They've never once mentioned that they want to re-sign Mitch Marner, which again, you're always careful to read too much into that, but you do, and you're like, maybe there is something going on behind the scenes and they're trying to figure this situation out. But I will say the longer this goes, into July, the less likely it becomes. You even look at teams like Vegas. They signed Olofsson yesterday. They signed Samsonov. Like, it's not going to be a lot of teams with money to make a trade of this magnitude. So we'll monitor on that front. Go ahead.
What do you think about him playing, lighting it up throughout the regular season like he does? We get to the trade deadline, and that is a time where other teams' ears are perked up to potential changes, big changes in their roster, and you can make a deal at the trade deadline. And Mitch is like, "Hey, maybe I can go win right now before I go to free agency." And
But
you
you don't
can
think
make
you can
some
win
kind of a
here?
change, huh?
You don't think you can win in Toronto?
I don't. I think he
I don't
hasn't
think that.
won.
I don't think trading him in season is going to make any sense, because number one, the most important thing, you're going to kill the room. If you have Mitch Marner and everybody loves the guy, you're going to kill the room.
Not necessarily. Guys are pretty resilient to that. They can lose their best friend on the team, and the next day, you go to work with the guys on the team and you kind of, you adapt. And I don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't think you will kill the room. I think if the right deal is in place and you get the right kind of players back and set yourself up, it's tough to say, man. Anything could happen. It's going to be interesting, though. But I guarantee you, he's going to be playing damn good, putting up his regular season points like he always does. And people are going to forget. And maybe they just run it back, and maybe he walks straight to free agency. I don't know. I hope that doesn't happen, though.
Yeah, I think ultimately that's going to happen. If they're not going to trade him, they're going to walk him to free agency, and then you're going to get 10.9 million in cap space, which again ultimately is a win, because people forget about that. They want pieces, they want this and that back, but that's sort of currency in my world, is getting 10.9 million bucks. Just think right now what you can get for 10.9 million, whether on the open market or anywhere else, considering some of the other free agents. Like, they're going to have 21 million between Marner and Tavares, maybe a bit more. So like, that's currency for me. Lastly, I just want to get your thoughts. I exchanged texts yesterday with both Joe Quenneville and Stan Bowman. They're back in the mix here, Rosie. What timing too?
Yeah, I know. I read a couple things online. You go to the comments, and the bleeding hearts who don't really understand the situation are just screaming, "Oh my God, you would enable him." And it drives me nuts, because they're both over and above good men. The situation they were put in, they have no tools to deal with it. Any other situation where someone's put in a crazy situation they've never been prepared for, they've never thought of, they have no tools to deal with it. Everyone's sympathetic to them, but these big bad men who didn't handle it properly. And you listen to his daughter. She's very adamant, very vocal that the whole story's been blown out of proportion. They've made up stats about him that aren't even true, and false narratives out the ass. And it just bothers me, because I know from people who have been with that man, day in and day out, that he is a really good person with a really good heart and really cares about people. And if he handled that absolutely wild and fucking crazy situation that went down with Kyle Beach in Chicago, he said sorry. And what you just want his life to be over. You want him to be done. You want him to be like it's just the wrong way. And people think that they're progressive, and they think that they're kind. They think they're helpful. And meanwhile, they got pitchforks and they're trying to bury a guy who doesn't even deserve it. It drives me nuts. So I'm glad the NHL came to its senses, reinstated those guys. They've already lost like what they had in Chicago, what they built. It was a modern day dynasty. Their reputations have been dragged through the mud. They've had enough. They've had a hell of a lot more than they deserved. And I'm glad that they're back in business and can work for somebody. I would love to have that guy in the Toronto Maple Leafs organization ASAP.
I think the Leafs need a new president. I've been steadfast on that for a couple of years. I just don't think Brendan Shanahan's that guy. And if you can bring in somebody like Quenneville, somebody like Stan Bowman, it sounds like Bowman is linked to the Edmonton job. In fact, I tried to get Stan on the show. He respectfully declined. I think there's some things happening behind the scenes, but I would have loved Q to coach this team. Nothing against Craig Berube. I think Q was the choice. Just unfortunate that like a month after the Leafs make that decision, suddenly Quenneville is available. The timeliness is what gets me, is like now is a time where everybody has made decisions, although I guess Quenneville can go to Columbus. But we'll monitor on those fronts, and they're back in the game here, our Stan Bowman and Joel Quenneville. It's time for the last call, brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. A lot of fallout from Steven Stamkos. Have you talked to Shanner in the last couple of days?
Yeah, I have. He said he was very much in the mix. He was telling me his fingers were in all kinds of different deals throughout the whole league, and it made me laugh because that guy is a wheeler and dealer. He wants to talk to everyone. He likes to network, and he wants to have his finger on the pulse all the time. It's quite funny, but yeah, I think you'd be mistaken if you didn't think Shanner was a big part in getting in Stammer's ear. And
oh, was he? Yeah, because he knows him from Tampa.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, and they go back. Stammer's good. I've been to weddings before where Stammer's there in the middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan and stuff. He's just a solid team guy. Lots of guys love him. Really good dude. And I think when the writing was on the wall that Tampa wasn't going to have him back, which is a story unto itself, I think Shanner was working the phones pretty good.
Wow. Well, the one thing he probably told Stammer is like, you'll never be hungry in Nashville, right? Because Shanner loves his food and his cuisine.
He loves to mock. Shanner can't say enough about Nashville.
Yeah.
And you talk about the state tax stuff. You talk about the cost of living. You talk about the weather and stuff. And obviously, Stammer's used to all that stuff. But the fit made sense once the writing was on the wall in Tampa for him to go there. And he had a lot of like-minded people that he knew. And yeah, I just think that the splash Nashville made is quite wild.
So it's funny you bring up Nashville because we've been talking behind the scenes about doing a potential nation vacation next year.
Yes.
For those of you unaware what that is, pretty much Rosie, me, producer Vic, we all get together. We hit the road with a bunch of our listeners, and we'll have packages put together that'll include flights and hotel, and we go somewhere and watch a Leafs game. So look out for that. And actually, I pinpointed like 6 dates. It's got to be probably on a Saturday night. One of them is Nashville. So maybe we go to Nashville and hang out with Shanner a bit.
That would be cool, man. I could think of a hell of a lot worse places to go than Vegas. I'm looking forward to it.
Exactly. Broadway, Lower Broadway, always a great time. So stay tuned to the program throughout the summer and the next season, where it sounds very likely we're going to have our first ever nation vacation. You can hang out and chill and get an autograph from Jay Rosehill. Wow.
Don't devalue whatever it is you're looking to get signed by me.
Hey, did I tell you I signed my first ever autograph at the Stanley Cup final?
No way. To who?
Yeah, some guy came up to me with his kid, and they're like, Nick Alberga, and I was like, yeah. I'm like, you looking for me? And I guess they had listened to me when I was on Fan 590. This is out in Edmonton, and like, can my son have your autograph? And I was like, what?
You got that Siggy down pat or what?
Nah, it's so bad. It's like N Alberga. It's so easy. I don't know.
Good Lord. We'll work on it. I'll help you.
What does yours look like? Just like a 69?
Like this, and then like and it's got her down pat, buddy.
Yeah, I think moving forward, the only autographs I'll give on the upper chest to females. That's it.
That is so offensive, man. I just
all right, Rosie. We'll leave it at that. We're gonna do another show tomorrow. So just programming note, we're gonna do 3 shows a week until about mid-July, and then go down to 2 shows a week in the second half of July. So tomorrow I'm going to be with Anthony Stewart. We're going to broadcast live from the Black Hockey Summit at the Scotiabank Pond here in Toronto. Going to be a lot of fun. And it's expected a couple of National Leaguers are going to roll by. I know Tom Wilson of the Washington Capitals is in the mix there, some other guys. So we're expecting a couple of current NHLers to be in the mix there. And looking forward to that. I think you're going to take next week off. So I'll talk to you in a couple of weeks, right?
We'll see. I got to go to Vancouver and see the in-laws, and that's going to be fun, but we're kind of doing some camping type thing. So I want to be a part of it. Yeah. I will probably jump on. I might be on my phone. We'll try the service, but I'd like to be involved with all the neat stuff you guys are doing. So I hope you don't push me out entirely, but yeah, I will be sporadically popping in and out.
Yeah, we'll get Rosie on from Van City at some point next week. Fingers crossed it's not overly quiet in this market. I want a couple stories to talk about. It's just going to get really, really boring really, really quickly. And we're going to start talking about like Pontus Holmberg for an entire show. So hopefully we don't get there. Thank you to everybody in the chat. You've been fantastic as per usual at the Leafs Nation 401, where you could subscribe, hammer that like button. Thank you to Brian Burke making another stop on this show. We thank him for stopping by all season long. Again, we're available wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. Thank you to producer Vic. For Jay Rosehill, I'm Nick Alberga. Take care. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews. We got clips. We got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.